Kansas City Chiefs 21, Miami Dolphins 14. Chiefs move to 7-2. Dolphins fall to 6-3. It looked like early on Mahomes had kicked the flu, right? The Chiefs offense was cooking early on, and then they slowed down. Chiefs offense only scored 14 points, but the difference in the game was stripping Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
A fumble 6 with the little lateral. And that was the difference in the game, man.
It really was. I mean, incredible play and massive just swing in momentum, high leverage, like one of those. So the situation was as big as anything. I mean, so this game starts and it's like, oh, we're going to get a shootout, you know? Both teams look pretty comfortable moving the ball. Kansas City in particular, like that offense just ticked right away, and then everything stalled. And then so just before halftime, Miami is trying to drive. They're getting the ball at the start of the second half. They're trying to do the double dip and get right back level, essentially. They're driving, throw a little wide receiver screen to Tyreek Hill. Trent McDuffie reads it immediately and just like gets hold of Tyreek Hill basically as soon as the ball arrives, makes the tackle, and strips the ball on the way down behind the line of scrimmage. Ball comes out, picked up, and then lateral to Cook, who takes it the distance. And suddenly you go from Miami's trying to get a score back and get, either within 10 or within a touchdown, and instead Kansas City puts another touchdown on the board before halftime. And, I mean, that ends up being the game from that point.
It was. I mean, and then you get to see Miami, a high-powered, explosive offense, but they have not. Do they have to come from behind? I know they've had come from behind wins and everything, but down 3 scores was, that's a massive challenge, especially outside of Miami, right? In Miami, we talked about the Dolphins averaging over 43 points per game. It's about half that now in all other cities in the world.
Well, so also the other one that's perhaps more pertinent now is they are averaging 39 points per game this season against teams with losing records, and 17 points a game against teams with winning records.
Yeah, that's probably the bigger indicator. Not so much the home. Like the home thing helps, but when you're at home against Carolina, the Giants, the Broncos, it's a little bit of a different story. Mm-hmm. So Miami's trying to make their comeback. They finally get into the end zone. Was it Cedric Wilson on the touchdown?
Yeah.
Yeah, Cedric Wilson. I don't know if that was back shouldered or not, but it was a pretty good ball location for him to go up and make a play. It was 21-7. The Chiefs come back. Patrick Mahomes with his second lost fumble in 2 weeks. Uncharacteristic, not only Mahomes getting sacked, but also putting the ball on the turf. That gave Miami new life, and they got within a score, and then they were driving down for the potential game-tying drive. And then it was just kind of ugly at the end. A miscommunication. Ball maybe slipping out of Tua's hand on third down, and then a drop snap on fourth, and the game was over.
The other thing that gave them life was no flag for a late hit out of bounds on Patrick Mahomes that would have extended a drive, and essentially, like they
usually gets that call.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was though.
I mean,
that was one of those.
Had that have been called,
his last step was, on the green.
Had that have
been, he was in the air as he was getting hit.
Had that have been called, not a single human in the world would have batted an eyelid, put it that way. They had Kansas City in a hole in that drive. This was just after they scored their touchdown. The Chiefs were like 3rd and 20, just backed up deep, and then that play happens, and Mahomes is trying to go for the first down, isn't going to get there. He gets hit, arguably pretty late out of bounds, doesn't get a flag on that play. And
that would have been offsetting penalties anyway. But Kansas City, because Kansas City had holding on that penalty on that play, and they punted. I mean, they would have had another chance on third down.
Yeah,
basically.
They end up,
if I remember correctly,
right? No flag. Anyway, no late hit out of bounds on that play, and they end up getting extended life because of it. The Chiefs. Then, as you say, that final drive, you have the missed deep pass, and then on fourth down, everything on the line, bad snap. Like the most underwhelming way a game can end possible. And the thing is, that play would have been so interesting because Spags was sending the house.
Yeah.
It was like engage 8 from Madden. Everything was on the way, and instead they can't even get the snap gone. Like, had they been able to get that ball to Tua, that would have been a very interesting play.
Yeah, they asked Tua after the game what was the play. It was, it's cover zero, best matchup, So could have seen the previous play was really odd. There was again, I can't remember the receiver offhand, but a go.
It was Tyreek, I think, right? He was behind.
Was it Tyreek?
I think so.
I mean, it was a go, and it looked like. So at first, it was like, oh, Tua's throwing an out, but he's putting air under it, right?
Yeah.
And so it looked like he kind of got like mid throw, and then realized the receiver's on a different page and just kind of let it go. Last night, that would have been called intentional grounding, by the way. In the Bills game.
Chris wasn't happy with that.
So I didn't get to hear Chris, but I was not happy. I was furious.
Yeah.
Actually, I cannot stand bad intentional grounding calls. Can't stand it. I'll wait 2.5 hours from now. We'll get into it.
Yeah.
Are you looking at the play?
Yeah.
It's kind of a anticlimactic finish because I was more thinking, what if the Dolphins? Because the Dolphins' run game got them back into it a little bit during that final drive. Raheem Mostert breaking off a couple big runs, and then that was it, man. I was kind of hoping to see if they went for two.
Yeah. It wasn't Tyreek Hill. I think it must have been Cedric Wilson.
Yeah, I thought it was Wilson actually offhand, but
yeah, I don't know what happened there.
Anyway, Tyreek Hill ends up having the most important play of the game against his former team, the Chiefs, and it ends up being a fumble. Him and Tua just felt like they were just off. I mean, Tyreek Hill finishes with 8 catches for 62 yards, but had the fumble. It was a deep crosser where they just missed, a couple plays where they just missed. So you didn't have that same explosive offense from the Dolphins. And I think it brings up the questions. I was getting some Cowboys vibes from the Dolphins coming out of this. This team that I don't want to say they're front runners, but they could pile it on. They can have these games where it's like, wow, this team's impressive. This team scores a lot of points. They beat up on the teams that they're supposed to beat up on. But now I think there are fair questions about the Dolphins. And I think you're right. It's not just out of Miami. It's the fact that when they've been out of Miami, they've played in Buffalo, in Philadelphia, in Germany against the Chiefs, and those games have been a struggle. I mean, they look like a completely different team offensively against good teams, and happens to be outside of South Florida.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to follow them until they show they can shake that off. The fact that they're averaging more than double the number of points against losing teams versus winning teams, that's your narrative now. And it's incumbent on Miami to show that that's not a real trait of this offense or this team, and that they can actually rise to the occasion and beat the best teams in the NFL. But until that happens, it's, justifiably what they're going to get tagged with. I mean, as soon as that game finished, on Twitter where it shows you like the trending topics or whatever, it was like Miami #1, and then #2 was just the word frauds.
Fraud trending,
yeah. Below Miami. And you're like, I mean, unfortunately, that's going to be your thing until you can beat one of these teams.
On the other side, Kansas City's offense, again, only scored 14 points. The defense holds Miami to 14 and scores 7 of their own. They're 7-2. It's kind of a different world for the Chiefs here, where the defense is carrying them. This is the 5th game out of 9 where they've scored 21 or fewer points offensively. Any concerns on your end? These are the types of things where weaknesses usually show up in the playoffs. And so is this one of those things where the Chiefs end the season with 3 or 4 losses, maybe get a #1 seed, but go up against the Ravens or a decent team in the playoffs, and all of a sudden it's like maybe the offense just isn't good enough this year?
I mean, Mahomes kept saying afterwards in interviews that, they were asking about his defense, and he was saying, I think this is the best defense in the league, let alone the best defense that I've had connected with me. But he was also saying, we'll get the offense figured out. We will. And I kind of believe him. I think eventually they've done it too many times already that I don't believe that this offense is just going to be average and stink for the majority of the season and not be the Chiefs. I think eventually they're going to find whatever it is. And they've shown flashes of it, and we've seen drives here or there, but it just keeps stalling out again. I do kind of believe them. I think they've shown enough of a history of struggling, having some problems, adjusting to the league, and then getting it again. And maybe you won't see, true vintage Chiefs where there's so many weapons and it's just impossible to stop. But I get the idea that eventually this season we are going to get a better version of this offense consistently. So I kind of buy that. And, both defenses, I think, did a really good job in this game. It wasn't just both offenses were struggling and therefore it was a low-scoring game. It's like Spagnuolo over there was playing out of his mind on the call sheet. Vic Fangio, we know, is like the godfather of the defense and sweeping the NFL. I think we have to pay credit to both defensive coaches for what they did in shutting down these two offenses.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it was a fun game, even if it didn't light up the scoreboard. Still a fun game, back and forth, and just kind of wish we got to see that final play.
Only enhances the without Taylor Swift splits as well.
I told you she couldn't afford a flight to Germany.
Right.
That's
can't blame her. It's a long
easy.
way.
Like they want to have a Super Bowl overseas. You can't get Taylor Swift over there. She's
also, I mean, the time zone feels like the biggest issue there.
What's that?
I mean, you're gonna put the Super Bowl on in Germany. It's gonna be like 2 a.m.
No, can't do that. Don't want to do that.
There, not here.
No, I get it.
Because obviously you can't expect them to.
I don't want
move the time zone in Eastern.
Well, we're not talking about that.
Time is when it is.
All right, Chiefs move to 7-2. Them and the Ravens sitting atop the AFC.